The story you are about to hear tonight began after an act of revenge which, according to the man himself, ended with a passion for the taste of human flesh. That feeling of dominance and control one gets after taking another's life. This is what drove this man, Joseph Roy Mattini, a morbidly obese individual with a penetrating gaze and thick features, an intimidating smile, standing 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighing over 330 pounds. He mentioned in his statement, "The next time you drive down the road and come across a burger stand you've never seen before, think about this story carefully, because you never know who you might be eating." This criminal story features Joseph Roy Mattini, who was born on the 2nd of March, 1955, in Baltimore, United States, to a family of 6 children, where they were mostly neglected by their parents, as his father had a drinking problem and spent all their money on alcohol, forcing his mother to work hard to support them. At the age of 6, his father died in a car accident, and the children were left in their mother's care. She took on the family's responsibilities but neglected them even more because she had to work double shifts to make ends meet. As a waitress and a food truck driver, Mattini and his siblings were often sent to live with other families in the foster care system, which allows children in dangerous, abusive, or neglectful situations to live in a safe place temporarily until it's determined they can return to their biological parents, or, in some cases, the foster family wishes to adopt them. Joseph sought comfort in food, and he began overeating, which led to serious obesity problems that worsened as he grew older. At the age of 18, he claimed to have joined the U.S. Army in 1973 and served in Germany. During his service, Joseph became addicted to drugs, which dramatically changed his behavior. This was just the beginning of many problems that would follow. His mother started noticing the decline in her son, who was distancing himself from the family more and more. His friends called him teeny or little, because he was 6 feet 1 inch tall and of large build. His addiction gradually led him to follow his father's path, frequenting bars and taverns, living with homeless people who had no place to go and who set up improvised camps in southern Baltimore. It was there that he met a woman, whose name is unknown, with whom he had his first child. After learning he was going to be a father, he got a job at a company where things were going well since he was considered intelligent, well-spoken, and very polite. Few people knew he had an addiction problem. Everything began on a night in July 1994. Joseph was at work, driving a forklift at a company called Pallets, which specialized in selling and manufacturing wooden platforms. That night, he worked late, doing overtime. After finishing his shift, he headed home as usual. When he opened the door and turned on the light, he noticed the house was empty. Neither his 6-year-old son nor his wife were there. She had taken everything and left him. Seeing the silence in his home, he became furious. Not so much because of the loss of his wife, who was also addicted to drugs and with whom he frequently fought, but because he loved his son. In fact, he referred to his wife as trash, who consumed all kinds of substances. After a few days, he started looking for them everywhere, but had no success. It wasn't until 6 months later that some people told him they had seen her on the other side of the city with a man who forced her to offer intimate services in exchange for drugs, without caring that the child was present. A few days later, his ex-wife and her partner were arrested for using and carrying illegal substances, and the child was taken away for neglect and child abuse. Joseph couldn't do anything to get his son back, and this filled him with hatred toward his wife and her partner. He felt that they needed to pay for what they had done, taking his son from him. So he began searching for both of them after learning they had been released. The only punishment they received was losing custody of the child. He found out they were living under a bridge with other drug addicts and homeless people, so one day he decided to go after them. But unfortunately, he didn't find them. However, he did find 2 people lying on a filthy old mattress, and seeing them reminded him why his son had been taken away, so he exploded in anger and killed them with an axe. Afterward, he hid their bodies in some bushes and continued searching around the area. That same night, he kept looking under nearby bridges. It was then that he saw two women near the spot where he had committed the murders. He approached them and tried to get information about his wife's whereabouts. One of the women walked a few meters away, where he interrogated her, but due to drug influence, she wasn't thinking clearly and acted as if she knew nothing. Since he couldn't get what he wanted, he started beating her, then assaulted her and ultimately killed her. Once he was done with her, he dragged her to some bushes and left her there. Then he went after the other woman and did the same, but she claimed she didn't know who he was talking about, so he killed her too. Just as he was about to throw her into the bushes with the other woman, he noticed an old man fishing by the river, watching him. So, he grabbed a piece of steel lying among the trash and ran toward him. When the old man tried to react, he was met with a series of blows that ended his life. After realizing what he had done, he dragged the victims' bodies to the side of the Patapsco River in Baltimore, Maryland, and tried to cover them with stones. Then he washed himself in the river and tried to clean up the area as much as he could to avoid leaving any clues. That night, he claimed he had committed 5 murders in approximately 7 hours while searching for his wife. One night in 1994, he lured 39-year-old Kathy Ann Magaziner, who had a criminal record, to the factory. They used illicit substances together, and when she refused to be intimate with him, he strangled her to death. Afterward, he dug a shallow grave in a small forest behind the factory, where her body remained unnoticed for 6 months, until Joseph dug up her head and threw it in the trash. The body stayed there for years. On the 2nd of August, 1995, the bodies of the homeless men Randall Brewer and Randy Baker were discovered. Weeks later, Mattini was accused of both murders because some people had seen an overweight man wandering under the bridges that night, which led investigators to suspect Joseph Mattini. Bail was denied, and he had to remain in Baltimore City Jail for 18 months while awaiting trial. However, there was no evidence linking him to the crime. After a week-long trial, he was released due to a lack of evidence, as it was established that the actual perpetrator was another homeless man. Upon his release, Joseph returned to his former employer, asking to get his job back at the pallet company in Baltimore. His boss agreed because he considered Joseph a good worker. But that wasn't all. His boss also granted Joseph's request to stay in a small trailer on the property, with the promise that Joseph would watch over the place since he had nowhere to go after being in jail. So, he was given the keys to the entire facility, trusting in his good intentions. However, what the boss didn't know was that Joseph had other plans in mind because the company was located on a dead-end street, isolated from the highway, a perfect place for him to act out his fantasies. In November 1996, he lured Kimberly Line Spicer, whom he stabbed to death after she resisted his advances. He buried her body inside the factory. At that precise moment, he mentioned cutting off some of her flesh and storing it in containers, which he then placed in the fridge. During that week, he set up a small hamburger stand where he claimed to have mixed pork and beef with human flesh, and nobody noticed the difference in taste. In fact, he said many people told him those were the best burgers they had ever eaten. He added that everything was going well until he ran out of his special meat. On the 8th of December 1996, he brought his new victim, Rita Kemper, to the trailer. Joseph said they used drugs for a while inside the trailer until he tried to undress her. She refused his advances and began screaming in desperation. But there was no one around to help her, so in a moment of distraction, she ran out of the trailer. Joseph chased her down and dragged her back. He told her he was going to kill her, but she managed to escape again. She ran toward a barbed wire fence, but that didn't stop her from jumping over it. She made it to the road, where a truck driver stopped after seeing her. He took her to a nearby gas station, where they called the police. Meanwhile, Joseph gathered her clothes, knowing they would soon come for him. But as he stepped out of the trailer, an officer was already there. The officer told him to get on the ground, and he was arrested. As expected, Joseph denied all the charges against him. One of the accusations was that the woman had claimed he said she would end up like the other girls buried in the woods. Joseph immediately denied such words, adding that everything he did was consensual, so they let him go. Realizing that the police might come to check on the situation, Joseph asked a friend to help him dig up Kimberly's body, which was still inside the factory. Then, on the 15th of December 1996, his friend reported him to the authorities, stating that Joseph had asked for help moving a woman's body buried next to the trailer. When police arrived, they arrested him again, and even arrested the business owner for alleged complicity. Then they asked Joseph to show them where Kimberly was buried. He gave them the exact location, and when they dug, they found the body of a woman. That same day, during interrogation, he confessed to other crimes, including his previous victim, Kathy Ann Magaziner, and led police to where he had buried her. They found a shallow grave with her remains. Most of her skull was missing, but the victim was identified through her dental records. It was confirmed to be Kathy. However, days later, Joseph claimed to be a serial killer who had committed 13 murders. According to him, he had thrown bodies into the Patapsco River, and they had never been found. He even claimed to have cut up many of his victims and stored their meat for later consumption. Eventually, he came up with the idea of setting up a food stand to sell human flesh mixed with animal meat. At first, his statements were shocking, but as time passed, doubts began to arise about their truthfulness. Every day he was interrogated in a small room, as investigators were trying to solve many unsolved cases. Trying to uncover what he had done, they took him out of jail every day, moving him from place to place, hoping he would lead them to where he had disposed of the bodies. This went on for a month, and they were never able to find any of the victims Joseph claimed to have killed. At this point, the detectives weren't sure if Joseph was telling the truth or just rambling because his statements were incredibly inconsistent. His stories sounded too fantastical to be true. The main challenge in investigating Joseph Mattini was that he was also a liar, with the ability to make up stories while recounting events. In 1997, he was tried for the case of Rita Kemper, the last victim who managed to escape, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison for attempting to kidnap and assault her. In 1998, he pled guilty to killing Kathy Magaziner, but on the 14th of July, 2000, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No one could understand whether Joseph was lying for attention or if his mind was so unstable that he was confessing to crimes he hadn't committed. No evidence of the murders he allegedly committed was ever found. It was also never proven that he opened his food stand to sell human meat. The only murders he was definitively linked to were 2. His mental instability was evident, leading him to create false confessions. In his final words, he said, "The words, 'I'm sorry,' will never leave my mouth because it would be a lie. I am more than willing to give my life for what I've done so that God can judge me and send me to hell for eternity. I simply enjoyed it." On Saturday, the 5th of August, 2017, he was mysteriously found dead in his cell at approximately 3 in the afternoon in the Western Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland, from unknown causes at the age of 62. This case is a clear example that not everything killers confess is true, as many tend to claim crimes they didn't commit, seeking importance and recognition. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. I hope you had an excellent night and continue enjoying another day. This is Mr. Fear. Until the next episode.